Remember, when you walk pan, I'm a tide. And when you work and cut and reap, remember, your 10 fingers, the deca, it means who you pay tribute to.
Smith had been preaching in Jamaica for close to 10 years after he returned from Canada, a well-educated man. He held a doctorate degree in divinity and a doctor of ministry degree. He was also a registered clinical counselor and a psychotherapist.
What you have to say for yourself?
What's for dinner?
What's going on here?
What's that stink?
What's this for?
What time is it? What's that?
Elementary, my dear Watson.
Hey there, my fellow true crime aficionados. Welcome back to Watson's World. Pull up a chair, because today I've got a story that's been simmering in the underbelly of Jamaica's sun-kissed streets. You might have heard the name Kevin Anthony Smith, or maybe you haven't. But by the end of our little chat, you'll know him and maybe wish you didn't. No, Kevin Smith wasn't your everyday preacher. He was the kind of leader who didn't just enter a room, he owned it. But his story takes a dark twist after a ritual he led went horribly wrong. And suddenly, he's splashed across the news for the most tragic reasons.
Kevin Smith came to public attention over a week ago when cult killings took place at the Pathways International Kingdom Restoration Ministries that he led in Montego Bay, St. James. But for his followers, he was known for close to 10 years. During that time, his bizarre teachings and methods were shared with his flock.
Let's hit the rewind button for a sec. Before the chaos of October 17, 2021, Kevin Smith was a bit of a mystery man. Born in the quiet town of Glengough, St. Catherine, on April 10, 1982, his life took a turn when he moved to Canada in '93. He was chasing that dream of a better life. Like many Jamaicans. He left behind the halls of Jamaica College after just 3 months, heading north to join his mother along with his siblings. His father, who was a member of the Jamaica Defense Force, remained in the picture but from afar. Smith was a student of places with some weighty names: Vision International University in California and Mount Olive Bible Institute in Canada. And it was in Canada where he started his ministry, got married, and then hit the brakes with a divorce. But Canada wasn't all smooth sailing for Smith. On November 5th, 2007, he found himself on the wrong side of the law, convicted of sexually assaulting a 21-year-old man. The court heard how, after the assault, Smith handed the man $200 Canadian. He served 6 months behind bars for that crime and got slapped with a probation order that was supposed to last 10 years. But Smith, he didn't exactly walk the straight and narrow after that. In August 2017, he broke those probation rules, ending up with a suspended sentence and another 18 months of probation in Toronto. Now, whether that legal heat was what sent him packing back to Jamaica, that's not crystal clear. But what we do know is that by 2011, Smith was back on Jamaican soil, ready to plant new seeds of ambition. Now folks, you've got to ask, how does a man with a shadowy past and questionable credentials captivate the minds of over 500 followers? Let's peel back the layers. He had this foundation, right? Pathways International Foundation Limited, with a mentorship program and a church on Albion Road right there in Montego Bay, St. James. And he was all about that success, showing it, living it, and preaching it.
He also had a taste for the flamboyant. On his birthday on April 10, 2018, he traveled in one of two stretch limousines escorted by police officers on motorcycles through Montego Bay. The occasion was complemented by a marching band.
Now Smith, he wasn't just any guy with a plan. He had a past with a sexual assault conviction. Yet he still managed to get influential Jamaicans to back him up. He even made his way into the classrooms of the University of the West Indies Mona campus there in Jamaica. And his degrees? Well, let's just say some folks weren't too sure what to make of them. They could not be verified. But here's the thing. Dr. Henley Morgan, a management consultant, somebody who was well connected in Jamaica, saw something in Smith. As a matter of fact, Morgan said Smith had great prophetic powers. Morgan even helped him get into the corridors of power locally. Smith wanted to be a prophet, a healer, an evangelist, someone who would use Christianity to bring prosperity to believers. Now, Smith had big goals, right? And to hit those targets, he didn't just sit back. He put on a show. We're talking about events like this 1 week-long conference where Dr. Henley Morgan pulled out all the stops. It was like a who is who of Jamaican society, all there to see what Smith was all about. Morgan, he was like Smith's ticket to the big leagues. He used his own reputation to give Smith a boost, introducing him to the movers and shakers, especially in the church scene. But even with all that networking, there were some red flags waving in the breeze. People started to notice Smith had some, let's call them, unique ways of handling money and putting himself on a pedestal, especially when he was in the spotlight.
He calls himself His Excellency Dr. Kevin O. Smith, Jamaica's eminent international ambassador, Israel God King 999.
He had an eye for who got the credit, and he made sure it was him getting the glory at all times. But people were so dazzled by his charisma, they let it slide. After about a year, though, the honeymoon phase was over. Morgan and Smith went their separate ways, and Smith left for St. James, but not without leaving some scars, a trail of pain and debt, as Morgan put it. Now, some of the business people who backed Smith's early plays, hoping for a big payout, they kept their mouths shut. They're not too keen to chat about their ties to him. And those photos with big names like former Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller and some other well-known celebrities, they have been floating around, making people wonder just how far Smith's influence reached. In St. James, amidst all the beauty and the struggles, Smith's church work didn't really raise any eyebrows at first. It seemed like he was just another preacher doing his thing, trying to do some good in a place that's seen its fair share of trouble. Alright, so we have got to talk about the folks who were in the thick of it all, the members of Smith's congregation. Most of them only chat off the record, but what they say paints a pretty vivid picture. They'll tell you how Smith, their shepherd, had a heart for the poor and the down and out types that filled his pews. But here's the catch. Being part of the flock wasn't free. No siree. There were membership fees, and if you were late or didn't pay up for the services, you'd get an earful.
You're going to have to till the ground, work the ground to pay worship to him. That's why he says the 10 fingers, your 10 toes, as you walk the earth, you give them 10 toes. Remember, when you walk pan, I'm a tide. And when you work and cut and reap, remember your 10 fingers, the the deca, it means who you pay tribute to. I am your king as long as you pay tribute to me. So the day you stop pay tribute is the day you stop worship. And the day you stop worship, you can't live yourself. Let me give you the understanding. When you have a landlord and the landlord say, you rent my place, as long as you pay your rent, you can stay in peace. The day you stop paying your rent, you have to come out of yourself. I have to talk it so no get what I say. So when people said, I can't pay my tithes, which is the worship, God's law said you must, by the sweat of your brow, you must eat bread.
Simit, by all accounts, was magnetic. Members were so drawn to him that they would give their entire first paycheck of the year to the church. Can you imagine? And all that cash added up to something like $1 million per week. All from the church's activities and Smith's so-called spiritual gifts. As a matter of fact, one former church member had this to say: if you wanted a one-on-one with Smith, that would be $50. If you needed a spiritual encounter or deliverance session, that would set you back $350. This person also said it felt like being enslaved under what they called Smith's manipulation and tyranny. And get this, some folks were so under his spell, they cut ties with family and friends outside the church. One ex-member who bailed in 2015 said it was like they weren't allowed to have a life outside of Smith's control. Now, here's where things take a turn towards the bizarre. On October 13th, Smith starts talking about getting on the ark. That's what he called his church. And he's not talking about a Sunday school story. He's telling his people to get ready to board on October 17th. But not just anyone could hop on. No impure blood allowed, he said. And by that he meant anyone who had gotten the COVID-19 vaccine.
America, the walls of water is coming against you. As long as you are pure blood, I will seal you. I am one, but there are many, and you will get instruction. You see, the 144 miles of Jamaica is the fulfillment of the prophecy. The mystery is now revealed. So what they have put inside is to create the Castillo effect, where a monster species rises up and destroys and exterminates the entire human civilization.
Yep, you heard that right. Smith was preaching against the vaccine, calling it the mark of the beast. And his followers, they listened. They showed up to church all dressed in white, ready for, well, we'll get into that next. So the scene is set, and it's October 17, around 6 p.m. Things at Smith's church take a turn for, let's say, theatrical. He's got everyone kneeling before they even step foot inside the church, telling them he's going to write their names in the Lamb's Book of Life. This is straight from the people who were there, accounts that the Director of Public Prosecutions got a hold of. And Smith, he's on another level. He tells his flock to cover their heads with white, not wanting any eyes on him while he's in his so-called glory. This whole service, if you can call it that, goes on until the early hours of the next morning. Now here's the part that gets me. Despite all the talk about judgment and death, the folks there didn't take it as anything more than words. They didn't actually think he meant it literally. But as we know, words can be a prelude to something darker. One woman, looking back with a lot of pain in her heart, said she never imagined their leader, the one they trusted, would be the one to lead them to sacrifice. She told how some of the sisters were excited, even anxious, to be cleansed. But murder, That was never on their minds. Now we've reached what I can only call the bloody crescendo of this story. And I have to warn you, it's gruesome. October 17th is a day that's burned into the memories of those who were there. Smith shows up at the church with an 18-year-old named Kevon Plummer and a police officer. And right off the bat, he's making these wild claims, shouting that he's God in the flesh. Then things escalate quickly. Smith allegedly starts ordering that certain members have their throats cut, saying this was their ticket to the kingdom. It's hard to even say, but by the time the dust settled, 3 people had lost their lives. 2, it said, were part of this unthinkable sacrifice, and young Plummer was killed in a standoff with the police, who had rushed to the scene after getting calls about what was happening. One of the victims was Michael Brown, a man who was fighting a kidney problem, hooked up to tubes and looking for healing. He left the hospital because Smith promised him just that. But according to what's been reported, Smith told him, "You have to die, but you will rise again because I am the resurrection and the light," before pulling those life-sustaining tubes from his body. Then there was Taneka Gardner, 39 years old. She came to the church looking for help. And what happened next is it's beyond words. She was questioned about her health, about her faith in Smith's power to resurrect her. And when she affirmed her belief, the response she got was that her blood needed to be cleansed by having her throat cut. And she agreed, not once, but 3 times. The witness account says that when the time came, they couldn't go through with it. That's when someone else, a disciple named Andre Ruddock, who was called Archangel Gabriel, stepped in and did the unthinkable. Now, this next part adds another layer of disbelief to the whole situation. Turns out Taneka Gardner, one of the victims, had actually started paperwork back in 2019 to make Smith a beneficiary on her life insurance. Yeah, you heard that right. After her tragic death, chaos erupted. People were trying to get out of the church, and there were attempts to lock them in. Can you imagine the panic? But the police got there in time, stormed the place, and rounded everyone up, including Smith, Ruddock, and about 15 children who saw things no child should ever see. Now, as you can imagine, the whole country was reeling as these details came to light. Everyone was asking how this could have happened. Were the police clued in on any of this? And it sparked a big debate about whether the state should be keeping a closer eye on churches. But the drama was far from over. A week after the incident, on October 25th, Smith was in a car crash in Linstead, St. Catherine. He was on his way to Kingston on the police escort to face murder and firearm charges, but he never made it. The crash took his life and the life of 26-year-old Constable Orlando Irons. 2 other officers were seriously hurt. Now, Ruddock, he's been charged with murder, and they even laid charges against Smith posthumously. People had questions about the crash too. Why did the cops take the route they did? Did they follow all the protocols to keep Smith safe in custody? The police's traffic branch boss, Assistant Commissioner Gary McKenzie, said they're looking into it, making sure everything was up to snuff. They say they always aim for reliable and safe transportation for prisoners, considering more than just the quickest route. No. As the dust settles on this tragic saga, we come to the final chapter, guys. On November 8th, they did a postmortem on Smith, and it confirmed what you'd expect after a car crash. He died from multiple injuries caused by blunt force trauma. Now, here's where things get a bit hush-hush. Just a couple of days after that, Smith's body was cremated out in St. James. But getting details, that's like pulling teeth. Both relatives and the authorities are keeping their lips sealed. Carlton McFarlane, the head honcho over the Registrar General's Department, he sheds a little light. Says they've been waiting on a death certificate for weeks, but that's not stopping a burial. In cases like Smith's, sudden and violent, the cops can sign off on burial orders to let the disposal of remains go ahead. So, all the paperwork shuffling going on now, it's just to get his death officially on the books. And according to McFarlane, this isn't out of the ordinary, especially when there's no estate squabble over insurance claim in the mix. But speaking of estates, Smith's got a cloud of mystery hanging over his. The man had his hands on some prime real estate places in St. Anne, St. James, Montego Bay. He was even trying to buy the property where his church stood, but apparently he hadn't finished paying for it. And now for the big question everyone's chewing on. How do we stop something like this from happening again? What's the government's move? Should there be tighter reins on churches? Some people believe the police dropped the ball. They should have been more on the ball, more vigilant. I don't know about that. Churches are considered a safe haven in Jamaica. And Jamaica having the most churches per square mile, we have never seen things like these happening in Jamaica. Right? Of course, some people are calling for better intelligence on groups that might be tipping into fanaticism. I don't believe that, it's unreasonable for people to feel this way. I think that in light of all of this, Jamaica now needs to take a closer look on all of these organizations in Jamaica that call themselves church. There are some people, however, who don't like the idea of tightening the reins on these churches. Folks like Reverend Carl Jarrett, a big name in the Baptist world, who is not keen on the idea of the state meddling in church affairs. So where does that leave us? With a lot of questions, a lot of lessons to maybe learn, and a story that's going to stick with us for a long time. People, this was a heart-wrenching story. Thank you as per usual for taking the time out to support this channel. If you are a new visitor to the channel, go ahead and click on the subscription button. Also click on the notification bell so that you'll be alerted every time I upload a new video. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and X at The Noble Cop. Until next time, my beautiful people, peace out.